It's Tatas Tuesday, and this is going to be a particularly tricky Tatas Tuesday for me because this one affects me personally. And I admit I'm emotionally affected by this one, and I think that sometimes when things hit you in your gut, it's important to listen to those things, but instead of freaking out and screaming and sending angry things at people, you have to think it through and realize why something bothers you so much before you start attacking people and going after them and demanding change, because the important thing is to change in the right way. And if at the end of the day our goal is inclusion, then the policy changes actually have to guide us towards greater inclusion instead of just differentiated exclusion. And of course, I'm talking about the tempest in a teapot over an Xbox party at the Game Developers Conference. And to me, it's just a shining case study of benevolent sexism in action. And it's a shining example of how benevolent sexism still hurts women. And it hurts all women, not just some women. It actually limits and restricts all women. So let's break it down, okay? The scandal in question was an after-hours party held at a nightclub. And as part of that nightclub experience, there were lights, drinks, decor out of wrought iron, like flowers carved out of wrought iron that I saw. And then there were a couple of women dancing on podiums, those typical, the 2 foot high block risers, the sort of 2 foot by 2 foot risers that are pretty standard for go-go dancers at those clubs. I know I've been on my fair share of them in my life. I used to do that work. I preferred the 4 foot by 4 foot ones because you could get more of a stance. Those 2 foot ones are you're limited in what you can do, but they put them there because drunk people don't bang into them as much. But so these girls were wearing what some people consider to be schoolgirl outfits, and that's because they had green plaid skirts. To me, they looked more like the Las Catrinas characters from Sunset Overdrive without the face makeup. It was I guess you could say it was a schoolgirl cheerleader. To me, it just looked like Candy Kid Club wear. And I didn't bat an eye at it because I have seen so many women wearing clothing like that in that setting. But a few tweets went out and people started freaking out. And one particular photo that made the outfits look far more revealing than they actually were started spreading. Then the faces of the women were blurred out to, not shame them, which just made the whole thing even more shameful. Like, are they in witness protection? Are they accused of some crime? But, it just got worse and worse and worse because when you blur a face, you don't shame the person in the photo. You're shaming the person looking at the photo if they at all relate to the person in the photo, because there's this implication they were doing something shameful, so their identity had to be protected. Right? If they're doing nothing wrong, what's the problem with showing their face? Right? That is a question that remains unanswered with all these people who, after the fact, said it's not about shaming the dancers, but what Xbox did was uninclusive and wrong. You can't have it both ways, guys, and I'm going to show you once we get into it, once we really break this down. But right now, the important elements that I want everybody to keep in mind, because these are important, are that the venue was a nightclub. Nightclubs have a particular culture. You enter a nightclub and there's an implied agreement that when you enter a place connected to a certain culture, you are there to partake of that culture. You go to a beach for beach culture. You go to a restaurant for restaurant culture. You go to a pub for pub culture. And there's a reason some people prefer the pub experience to more of a fine dining experience. At the pub, you can sit at the bar, you can talk to the bartender. At a restaurant, It's not something people do as frequently on their own. You know, it's more, there are more rules in fine dining than there are in a pub setting. And some people like that and some people don't like that. But no one is going, oh, there is something morally objectionable about a pub as opposed to a restaurant. They both serve liquor. Okay. And so then Xbox, and this is where I actually get irritated. This was the part that bothered me. People can have any objection they want to something. They can complain. People have the right to complain. People have the right to express their views. That is fine. It was the response from Xbox, I think, was two wrongs trying to make a right. And Xbox has to change the way they approach these situations because they're not being inclusive. They are actually being highly exclusionary and perpetuating the sexual shaming that is inflicted on women, especially young women, in North American culture. So this was the thing on Xbox Wire called A Message from Phil Spencer. And this was posted on March 18th after the whole brouhaha happened. Today, head of Xbox Phil Spencer sent an email to the Xbox organization to address unfortunate events at this week's Game Developers Conference 2016. These events did not reflect the core values and belief of Xbox, where we believe in respect for the gamer, the medium, the industry, and for Microsoft as something that impacts every single person who loves games as much as we do. The full email has been reprinted below. You notice they couldn't even say we had dancing girls there and didn't have men dancing as well. Our bad. They didn't say we had women dressed inappropriately for a corporate setting. Our bad. They made this whole thing seem so bad that you couldn't even speak about what it was. This is shame in action, okay? This is the exact same patriarchal crap that led to people not saying a woman was pregnant. You couldn't even show a pregnant woman on TV until about 50 years ago. It was ridiculous. With child or in a way. You couldn't say pregnant. It's the same way some people get uncomfortable when you use the proper anatomical words for body parts like penis and vagina. It has to be PP and vajayjay. Why? Because we're not adults about human bodies. If you're going to own something, Microsoft, if you're going to be accountable, say what it is. Because this... oh, we're not going to mention it. We're going to refer to it, but we're not going to mention it. Makes it seem worse than it actually is. And it actually doesn't show what message was received, what changes are going to be made. Because if they had said, we see that our mistake was that we had female dancers, but no male dancers, I would be fine with that. And there are a couple of other things that I think could open up this discussion, but we'll get to that in a bit. But the point is, they didn't clarify. They didn't specify what the unfortunate incident was. It's ridiculous, but here's the email. How we show up as an organization is incredibly important to me. We want to build and reflect the culture of Team Xbox, internally and externally. A culture that each one of us can represent with pride. An inclusive culture has a direct impact on the products and services we deliver and the perception consumers have of the Xbox brand and our company as a whole. It has come to my attention that at an Xbox-hosted event at GDC this past week, we represented Xbox and Microsoft in a way that was absolutely not consistent or aligned to our values. This was unequivocally wrong and will not be tolerated. This matter is being handled internally, but let me be very clear. How we represent ourselves as individuals, who we hire and partner with, and how we engage with others is a direct reflection of our brand and what we stand for. When we do the opposite and create an environment that alienates or offends any group, we justly deserve the criticism. It's unfortunate that such events could take place in a week where we have worked so hard to engage the many different gaming communities in the exact opposite way. I am personally committed to ensuring that diversity and inclusion is central to our everyday business and our core values as a team, inside and outside the company. We need to hold ourselves to higher standards and we'll do better in the future. You notice they never said, we offended women? It was dancing around the issue. And the line I find particularly I'll go there, problematic in that it's not a problem but could be a problem, was when we do the opposite and create an environment that alienates or offends any group, we justly deserve the criticism. Okay, Xbox, so Halo and Call of Duty offend pacifist movements. Do you say you deserve that criticism? You make war games. It offends the people who are anti-war. You make violent games. It offends pacifists. Are you going to change for the pacifists? No, of course not, because we've already determined that violence in video games is covered as protected speech. Well, guess what? Sexualized characterizations are also covered by protected speech. This is no different, and yet it is. The industry is so afraid of gender and gender-related issues that they will not even state the problem. And anybody who's done any sort of intentional dialogue or team management or conflict resolution knows that you can't solve the problem unless you can state the problem. And right now, Xbox is so afraid of this that I have no confidence that they'll actually come to the right conclusion here. And this is why I'm so pissed off, because this could lead to things getting much, much worse for women like me who actually have done go-go dancing and, topless art modeling and TV shows where I was a go-go dancer on a TV show before I started hosting. I mean, it's an entry-level job in the entertainment industry. A lot of women take that job because it's networking opportunities. You meet casting agents. You get out there because you get to do those parties. For those women, a schoolgirl outfit is completely professional attire if you were hired to wear it. That is your uniform. And while internal discussions of these things at restaurants where, there was just a human rights challenge in Ontario where women complain that, guys can wear a shirt and dress pants and we have to wear this skin tight dress that is absolutely not appropriate for this job because we have to work and crouch down and bend over. And it's just, you can't move in these skin tight things. That is a totally different issue. And for those of you who don't know, the reason that people have dancing girls and we should call them professional dancers. Dancing girls sounds bad. But the reason you have professional dancers at clubs like that is it's a herd mentality. Nobody wants to be the first person out on that dance floor. So you hire people to get the party going. That's what it's for. The reason there are more often women than men is the same reason that ladies' nights happen in bars. It has nothing to do with any gender discrimination in business. It has to do with the fact that more men tend to go to nightclubs than women. Like, women get in free so that women will come, so that men will come. And that's just the nature of the club business. How do I know this? I worked clubs. Because I didn't come from a rich family, and that kind of work made me way more money than some minimum wage job. These are very good jobs for young women working their way through school, and that's what bothers me about the social stigma about the whole thing. It's way better money than you'll make in a minimum wage job, and the hours are fairly minimal. You'll do it, sometimes it's Thursday nights, but it's usually Friday, Saturday. And so you can schedule your classes around not having a Friday class, or at least not having an early Friday class. So you can work Thursday, Friday, Saturday, make your money that you need to cover your bills, and still do school. It's a great job in that way. And this is the reason I don't like these people saying it's inherently dirty. Now, do I think men should be able to make the same job, make the same money in the same way doing the same job? Yes, I absolutely do. I think that there's a very large number of not just, there's a very large number of gay men. And I'd say not just women, but it's not true. We know there isn't a large number of women in gaming. This is the thing we're trying to address. But the reality is there is a lot of gay men in gaming. So if we're catering to the current crowd as opposed to the crowd we want to attract, well, it would still make sense that there'd be male dancers because gay men want to look at things too. And I actually think, I agree, that holding networking parties in a nightclub setting is counterproductive. And it's not because of the dancing girls. It's because the music is too damn loud to talk and the bar is too dark to exchange business cards. But the other thing that those events do is they send out invites with indications of dress code. And you'll see this, I see this in invitations to events for companies like AOL or Husky back in the day, or the Microsoft hardware side. You see on the invite a suggested dress code so there's no confusion. It'll say dress sharp. If they want you to dress up more, it'll say business casual attire if it's okay to wear khakis and loafers. And those are there for a reason, because then people know how to dress. At gaming events, you do not see a dress code stated on an invitation because they know that men are going to show up in that swag t-shirt they got at the Bethesda booth last year. And they're wearing jeans. And you are not going to get computer nerds out of their jeans and t-shirts. I mean, it's like pulling teeth to get those guys into polo suits. And this is where I start going, if you want a professional environment, if you want people to dress professionally, you have to start letting them know in advance that that is expected. Because you can't let guys walk around looking like bums with those scraggly beards, not because they deliberately have a beard, but because they just haven't bothered to shave in 5 days. And the t-shirt that is clearly old, may or may not smell like stale laundry, old jeans and running shoes, and then pick on what any woman is wearing. If we're going to fixate on clothing, it has to be an equal level of expectation for both genders, or we are being sexist. So this current paradigm where it's like it's not appropriate. Women in schoolgirl outfits are not appropriate for a professional event. Now let's take out the word professional and replace it with corporate, because that's more accurate. Because like I said, for those dancing girls, those outfits are completely professional for their profession. But what people are saying is that GDC, specifically the Game Developers Conference, is a corporate event, and the party should reflect that. That's an absolutely fair comment. It has nothing to do with gender. Absolutely nothing. If they are corporate events, that is totally valid, and that means the men are expected to show up in shirts with buttons and at least khakis and dress shoes, and women are expected to dress business appropriate as well. If you want corporate events, that is totally up to the people who attend. If that is something they want, that is something they can go to. A lot of other professional conferences do push that way because they want people in that mindset. But the reality of gaming is not that. The reality of gaming is that we are an artistic business. And our parties, I believe, should reflect that reality, that we're not bankers. We're not lawyers. There are a lot of lawyers in gaming, but the overall industry is not one of the law. We are creatives. And I think we need to start thinking about gaming as much as a creative industry as a tech industry, because it is. And so if you have a problem with working with a woman when she's not dressed in something that hides her curves, you're going to have a problem doing motion capture because those suits cling. And the reality is the professional requirements in the arts are different. And I say this as someone who has done theater, who has done radio, who has done television. You have to get really used to nudity really quick, especially in theater or in fashion, because of the quick changes. People run off stage. They're barely off stage. They throw off their clothes. They have somebody else throw on their clothes. And if you can't handle that, if you freak out when you see a boob, you are in the wrong line of work, because that is something essential to the way live shows happen. And so this attempt to corporatize game development, to me, is denying its role as art. And what's funny to me is the exact same people who are pushing the games are art, games as art mandate, are trying to make people dress like we work in banking. And guys, the very reason we are able to have freedom of expression in gaming is because it is classified as art and therefore classified as speech. It is not a product like, you know, a whoozamajiggy or whatever, something you manufacture. It is art. It is creative expression. The very things that make certain situations more uncomfortable are the very things that protect our creative expression. This is going to sound like a crazy analogy, but hear me out. The same way first responders and soldiers and things like that put themselves in physical harm's way to keep people safe in the real world. Artists have to take risks on an emotional and a mental paradigm. We have to make ourselves uncomfortable for the comfort of the people that come to our shows. If you're not taking risks in an artistic setting, you're not really an artist. You're a craftsman. And that's the problem that we're seeing in games. People want to be too comfortable and still identify as artists. You're not. Art is risky. Art is scary. And, you know, most of the time, yeah, you're not risking physical injury, although dancers blow their knees out all the time. I'm living proof. But there's an emotional risk. There's a risk of embarrassment. There's a risk that something is not going to work out, that your intention is not going to get related and it's going to fall flat on your face. There is always a risk. And so my big concern in this is that Xbox is not going to take away the idea that, look, the whole nightclub thing is not serving the purposes of people who want to go to those parties. Turn up the lights, turn up the music, get more food, worry less about it being an ego-boosting experience, a catharsis experience, which is what those Hollywood-style parties are designed to do. Look, we're cool. And recognize that it's more a place that people want to talk and get to know each other and have those conversations. That has nothing to do with gender. That doesn't have to be this big hot button. We don't have to say it doesn't reflect our values. We're not providing the experience that the people attending our parties want. That's the sort of statement I would expect to see if Microsoft actually understood that the attendees are saying, like, look, you don't need to sell us. We're industry insiders. We're not the general public. We don't need this nightclub experience. That's totally valid. There's a lot of things that we could say are non-inclusive, but the thing that they are focusing on is sex. Here's another example of non-inclusion. They have bacon and ham in every single damn meal at these events. Every single one. Because most people like bacon. Well, guess what? Vegetarians don't want... They usually have vegetarian foods, but I keep kosher. I'm not going to eat bacon and I'm not going to eat ham. And I sure as shit am not supposed to touch something that has bacon or ham in it. Now, fortunately, I'm not that practicing, but I know I'm not supposed to do it. So these companies are forcing me to sort of pick the bacon out or eat friggin' cucumber and eggplant sandwiches. And there's no freaking protein in cucumber. Guys, if you're worried about inclusion, have freaking tofu. Have fried tofu steaks, have proper vegetarian proteins, if this is really about inclusion. But it's not. It's about gender roles. And it's about decency where women are concerned. That's what this is really about. And so all this talk of inclusion, it's nonsense. It's code. It's a code word for we want to be as gender non-offensive as we can possibly be. But that's impossible, guys. That's freaking impossible in the paradigm of art. You are going to offend. And your brand has to be fluid enough to let people know that, yes, we do have some products that are designed for adults and are going to offend more sensitive mental palates, so to speak. But we also have family-friendly fare that is appropriate for all ages. That is what the Xbox brand should represent. So this idea of inclusivity is extremely challenging when you're dealing in an artistic setting, because you have to include the people that want the sex and the violence because they're like, we're adults, we can handle it, we want to experience challenging things. You need to include people like us as well as the people who want pablum 24/7. And yes, I would love if the parties were quieter and better lit, but that has nothing to do with dancing girls. And let's face it, if the dancing girls weren't there, the music would still be loud and the lights would still be flippity-floppeting all over. Are those lights epilepsy tested? Are they safe for people who can't handle strobe, who have photosensitive seizures? Probably not. So let's cut this inclusive crap. Because if they were really inclusive, are there still stairs at the Microsoft booth at E3? Well, guess what? A wheelchair can't get up those, can they? Every damn year, they have a second level. Every damn year, a person in a wheelchair cannot get up those stairs and there is no elevator. So don't talk to me about inclusion. This is about gender roles. So if Xbox really wants to be inclusive, they have to start rethinking how their booths and how their parties are done from the ground up. The reality is these gaming conferences are these concentric rings of exclusivity. You keep leveling up as you get to know people and you get closer and closer and closer to that elite group. It is not an inclusive experience. It is an exclusive experience. And that doesn't mean you have dancing girls and no dancing boys. That's an easy fix. But the language of inclusion is what really just annoyed me, because as an anti-stigma advocate, that's not what this is about. You know, you're not trying to make the food more friendly for Jews and Muslims. There's still going to be bacon everywhere. So that's not inclusion. You know, you're not going to make your corporate booths any more friendly to people in wheelchairs. So you're really not interested in inclusion. You're interested in getting a certain type of woman to buy your products and consider working for your company. That's it. That's it. So I think they think it's inclusion, but it's a very, very limited paradigm. If they want strategies for inclusion, hey, I'm here. Hit me up. I'll be happy to consult, because I've done a lot of different inclusivity things. I had to do fundraising for various medical charities, and man, you want to talk about inclusion. You have to cover every dietary restriction, every possible mobility challenge. You have to have we called it the chill out room for people with autism, so that if they get overstimulated, they have a place they can go and just sort of get away from noise. We had to constantly monitor the music volume. All our lights had to be epilepsy friendly. We couldn't use chemical fog because of asthma. So this inclusivity thing just doesn't pass the sniff test. And so I hope now people, I also have an article on this on the Escapist, but I had to cover that from a cosplay perspective, so it was much more limiting. So I hope that people can now understand a bit more why this smells like BS to me. And what this really is people thinking women should still be ashamed for wanting to dance in a schoolgirl outfit. And the reality is, guys, in club culture, that's not strange. And if we want to move gaming events out of a nightclub environment, that is an option. You can still have it at the same venue, but turn up the lights and make it clear on the invitation that it's a mixer party, not club aesthetic. But when you're at that front door and you hear doom, 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 and you can see the lights going on, you know what you're going to get. You're going to take their free drinks because you can. And, you know, you're going to say hi to a few people you already know because you can, because there's really no way of introducing yourself. It's so loud in there. So, yeah, I do think things need fixing. And I do think we need to move forward. But screaming at each other over girls and over go-go dancers is not the way to do it. And I think that instead of freezing people like me out who are like, you don't understand, we have this fight every year. Like, I haven't been going to these trade shows for 10 years. You know, the way people have talked down to me on this without intending to has been astounding. I've been through it. I've seen it. I know it. I've been complaining about some of the same things. But white women aren't the only ones in gaming that deserve to be included who aren't being included. There are a lot of other people that are left out in the cold. And I think if we're going to tackle this, we should help Microsoft and other companies just, do what they need to do to get it right once, instead of them having to retool their system every 2 years because they realize there's another problem. Like, we have an opportunity to really make something truly inclusive for a lot of people. Let's not squander it by getting stuck on plaid skirts.